In the seemingly serene town of Brook Haven, Georgia, a deadly secret lurked beneath the surface, waiting to erupt. The tragic story of 18-year-old Heather Malone and her high school coach, Nathan Ellis, unfolds in a twisted tale of obsession and betrayal. What began as a mentorship spiraled into a dark affair that would end in heartbreak, violence, and loss. Join us as we delve into a chilling narrative where love turns deadly and the quest for justice becomes a haunting reminder of the dangers that can hide behind closed doors. Stay with me as we unravel the real truth. Welcome to Fatal Affairs, a channel solely focused on bringing daily told and untold crime cases on love, betrayal, and revenge. Thanks to all our viewers and subscribers for your unwavering support, and please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for future updates. We would really appreciate that. The year was 2014, and a chill gripped the small town of Brook Haven, Georgia. It was a January chill, the kind that seeps into your bones. But this year, the coldness ran deeper than the winter frost. A shadow had fallen across the quiet suburban streets, a darkness that would soon shatter the illusion of peace. In a modest, well-kept home, the kind where children's laughter usually echoed, the body of 18-year-old Heather Malone lay still, a tragic discovery that sent ripples of shock through the community. The investigation that followed was like peeling back the layers of an onion, each layer revealing a more disturbing truth, a tangled web of obsession, betrayal, and ultimately, devastating violence. At the heart of this tragedy was the complex relationship between Heather and Nathan Ellis, her high school coach, a connection that began innocently enough in the golden days of autumn 2013, but which would soon twist into a dangerous dance with fate. Nathan Ellis, a man of just 28 years, possessed a rare and captivating charisma. He had a way of drawing people to him, a natural magnetism that made him the center of attention without even trying. His easy smile and genuine interest in others made him a perfect fit for his role as the new basketball coach at Brook Haven High. His players didn't just respect his coaching, they admired him. They saw him as a role model, a mentor who cared about their lives beyond the basketball court. He was the kind of man who inspired trust, who made you believe in your own potential. And it wasn't just the players. Teachers, parents, even the town's mayor, all were charmed by his easygoing nature. His personal life, viewed from the outside, seemed to mirror his professional success. He was happily married to Hannah, his college sweetheart, the woman who had captured his heart years ago. Their wedding, a beautiful sun-drenched ceremony on April 14, 2012, was a testament to the deep and abiding love they shared. Hannah, a kindergarten teacher, was known throughout the town for her gentle spirit, her boundless patience, and her genuine passion for nurturing young minds. She possessed a quiet strength, a grace that radiated from within. They had recently purchased a cozy 3-bedroom house on the edge of Brook Haven, a place that represented the beginning of their shared dreams. It wasn't a mansion, but it was theirs, a place filled with the promise of a bright future, a nursery painted in soft pastels, a backyard just waiting for the laughter of children playing on a swing set, and the warm, comforting glow of a family they so desperately wanted to create. For Nathan, the transition to married life, while filled with joy, also brought its own unique set of challenges. Balancing the increasing demands of his new job, the late nights spent reviewing game films and strategizing plays, with his commitment to Hannah required more energy, more focus than he had initially anticipated. He found himself stretched thin, pulled in multiple directions. Hannah, ever supportive and understanding, encouraged him to pour his heart and soul into his coaching, reassuring him that they would always find time for each other, that their love was strong enough to weather any storm. Weekends were dedicated to transforming their new house into a home. They spent hours painting walls in calming shades of blue and green, choosing furniture that reflected their shared style, and talking for hours about their hopes and plans for the future. Hannah, her heart brimming with anticipation, even began a collection of baby names, carefully writing them in a small, leather-bound notebook she kept tucked away by her bed, a tangible symbol of the family they dreamed of building. Heather Malone, at 17, was a paradox wrapped in a paradox. On the surface, she was the quintessential high school dream girl, the star cheerleader, the center of attention, the girl every other girl envied and every boy desired. Her stunning looks, a carefully curated blend of youthful innocence and burgeoning allure, were her calling card. She moved through the halls of Brook Haven High with an effortless grace, her laughter echoing like wind chimes, her presence illuminating every room she entered. She exuded confidence, a self-assuredness that bordered on arrogance, a carefully constructed shield that hid the vulnerable girl beneath. She was the life of the party, the girl who always had a witty comeback, the one who everyone wanted to be around. Her popularity was undeniable, her social calendar overflowing with invitations. She was, to all outward appearances, living the dream. But behind the dazzling smile, the perfectly applied makeup, and the trendy clothes, Heather carried a weight, a burden far heavier than any cheerleader could bear. Beneath the carefully constructed facade of popularity and confidence lurked a deep well of insecurity, a gnawing emptiness that no amount of attention could fill. She yearned for something more, something deeper, something real. She craved love, the unconditional, unwavering kind that she had never experienced. She longed for stability, a solid foundation on which to build her life, a sanctuary from the storm that raged within her own home. Heather's world outside of school was a battleground, a constant source of pain and turmoil. Her parents, locked in an endless cycle of bitter arguments and recriminations, were more consumed by their own toxic relationship than by the needs of their daughter. Their home, once a place of comfort and security, had become a war zone, a place where love was a forgotten language and laughter was a distant memory. Her father, a shadowy, almost mythical figure who had abandoned them when she was just 10 years old, left a gaping wound in her heart, a void that she desperately tried to fill with fleeting moments of attention and validation. Her mother, a woman worn down by life's hardships and locked in a desperate struggle with the demons of alcoholism, barely managed to keep their small, cramped apartment habitable. Dirty dishes piled high in the sink, laundry overflowing from hampers, and the ever-present, lingering smell of stale alcohol painted a grim picture of neglect, a stark reminder of the brokenness that permeated every aspect of Heather's life. In this chaotic and loveless environment, Heather learned to fend for herself. She developed a keen sense of observation, a knack for reading people's emotions and manipulating situations to her advantage. She became a master of disguise, a chameleon who could adapt to any social setting, morphing her personality to fit in, to gain acceptance, to get what she needed. She discovered that her beauty and charm were powerful weapons, tools she could use to navigate the treacherous waters of her life, to escape the harsh realities of her existence, if only for a few precious hours. She pushed boundaries, tested limits, and reveled in the attention she received, craving the validation that was so desperately absent in her own home. Despite her popularity at school, despite the adoration of her peers, a deep-seated insecurity gnawed at her, a constant reminder of the love she had never known, the stability she had never felt. She longed for someone to see beyond the surface, beyond the carefully crafted image of the perfect cheerleader, someone who would offer her the unconditional love and acceptance she so desperately craved. And in Nathan Ellis, her charismatic and seemingly caring coach, she believed, perhaps naively, that she had finally found that someone. The air still carried the warmth of summer, a lingering sweetness before the crispness of autumn arrived. Nathan Ellis had been at Brook Haven High for only a few short months, yet he had already made an indelible mark on the school's atmosphere. His passion for basketball was infectious, his enthusiasm radiating outwards, touching everyone he encountered. He had a way of connecting with his players, seeing them not just as athletes, but as individuals, each with their own strengths, weaknesses, and dreams. He invested in their lives, both on and off the court, offering guidance, support, and a listening ear. He was more than just a coach. He was a mentor, a confidant, a figure of authority and respect. Heather Malone, with her usual flair for the dramatic, often lingered near the gym after cheerleading practice. The rhythmic squeak of sneakers on the polished wooden floor, the sharp whistle of the coach, the thumping bass of the music Nathan used during drills, all these sounds were a familiar backdrop to her afternoons. At first, her interest in the basketball team, and more specifically in Nathan, seemed harmless, a typical high school crush. She admired his confidence, the way he commanded respect from his players while still maintaining a sense of approachability. He wasn't just a figure of authority, he was someone you could talk to, someone who seemed to genuinely care. She watched him from the sidelines, her eyes following his every move, captivated by his energy and his easy smile. To Heather, Nathan represented something she lacked in her own life: stability, strength, and a sense of belonging. He was the kind of man she imagined could rescue her from the life she desperately wanted to escape, a knight in shining armor who could sweep her away from the chaos and neglect of her home life. She fantasized about him seeing her, really seeing her, beyond the makeup and the cheerleader uniform, seeing the vulnerable girl beneath. For Nathan, Heather's attention, while initially flattering, also presented a new and unfamiliar dynamic. He was still adjusting to the complexities of his new roles, husband and coach. The pressures of both were beginning to weigh on him, a subtle but persistent undercurrent of stress. The late nights spent reviewing game strategies, analyzing opponents' weaknesses, and planning practices often meant less time with Hannah. He felt a pang of guilt when he thought of her, busy managing her own classroom of energetic 5-year-olds, her days filled with the laughter and demands of her young students. He knew she missed him, and he missed her too, but the demands of his job seemed to constantly pull him away. When Heather began complimenting him, praising his coaching skills, or commenting on his leadership, Nathan felt a sense of validation he hadn't realized he craved. Her words were like a balm to his soul, a reassurance that he was doing something right, that he was making a difference. It was a subtle form of flattery, but it resonated deeply within him. By October 2012, the subtle dance of deception between Nathan and Heather had begun. Their interactions, initially fleeting and seemingly innocent, had become more frequent, more deliberate. Heather, like a moth drawn to a flickering flame, found countless reasons to talk to Nathan after practice. She would linger near his office, feigning a forgotten textbook or a misplaced water bottle, anything to prolong their conversations. Sometimes she would ask for advice about school, her grades suddenly slipping, her focus seemingly fractured. Other times she would claim she needed help with her cheer routines, demonstrating a sudden and inexplicable clumsiness that required his expert eye. These interactions, though seemingly casual, were carefully orchestrated by Heather, each word, each gesture, designed to draw Nathan closer, to weave him into her web. Nathan, caught off guard by her persistent attention, found himself in a precarious position. He was flattered, of course. Who wouldn't be? To be admired by a bright, beautiful young woman, to be seen as a source of wisdom and guidance, was a heady experience. He told himself he was simply being kind, being a mentor, offering a helping hand to a student in need. He rationalized his actions, convincing himself that he was providing a positive influence in Heather's life, a stabilizing force in what he perceived to be a chaotic home environment. He saw her as a troubled young woman, yearning for guidance, and he, with his natural inclination to nurture and support, felt a growing sense of responsibility towards her. He genuinely believed he was helping her, offering her the kind of support he would offer any student struggling with school or personal issues. But deep down, a small voice whispered a warning, a nagging feeling that he was treading on dangerous ground. He ignored it, pushing it aside, telling himself he was being overly cautious, that he was simply doing his job. Their conversations, initially light-hearted and focused on school or cheerleading, gradually became more personal, more intimate. Heather, with her uncanny ability to read people's emotions, sensed Nathan's vulnerability, his unspoken loneliness, his quiet struggle to balance the demands of his life. She confided in him about her difficult home life, painting a vivid picture of neglect and emotional abandonment. She spoke of her feelings of isolation, how she often felt like no one truly cared about her, how she longed for a better life, a life filled with love and acceptance. Her words, laced with a subtle undercurrent of desperation, tugged at Nathan's heartstrings. He listened patiently, offering words of comfort and encouragement, feeling a growing sense of protectiveness towards her. He saw her as a wounded bird, fragile and in need of care, and he felt compelled to offer her shelter. One evening in late October, after a particularly grueling practice, the kind that left his players exhausted and him drained, Nathan stayed late in his office to finish some paperwork. The silence of the empty school, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent lights, was a welcome contrast to the noise and energy of the day. He was just about to leave when he heard a soft knock on his door. It was Heather. She claimed she had left her phone in the gym and needed to retrieve it. When she entered his office, she thanked him for always being so kind to her, her voice soft and vulnerable. She spoke of how much she admired him, not just as a coach, but as a person. She told him he was the only adult who truly seemed to care about her, who saw her for who she was, not just the star cheerleader. For Nathan, the moment was emotionally charged. He saw Heather as a troubled young woman, desperately seeking guidance and validation. But the intensity of her words, the way she looked at him, made him feel something he wasn't prepared to acknowledge, a stirring of emotions that went beyond simple concern. The line between teacher and student, mentor and mentee, began to blur, and Nathan, though hesitant, though aware of the potential consequences, didn't stop it from happening. He allowed the conversation to continue, to deepen, to cross a line that should never have been crossed. By November 2012, the carefully constructed boundaries between Nathan and Heather had crumbled, swept away by the tide of their escalating emotional entanglement. Their meetings, once confined to the gym or Nathan's office during school hours, had become clandestine affairs, stolen moments in the quiet hours of the night. What had begun as casual conversations had morphed into private, intimate moments, shared in the hushed stillness of Nathan's office after hours, or beneath the bleachers of the empty stadium, shrouded in the darkness and the secrecy they craved. Heather, emboldened by Nathan's initial kindness and the intoxicating power of their shared secret, began to push the boundaries further, testing his limits, weaving a tighter web around him. She dressed more provocatively during practices, her movements more suggestive, ensuring she captured his attention, her eyes locking with his across the gym, a silent conversation passing between them. Nathan, battling a growing sense of guilt and unease, tried desperately to rationalize their increasingly intimate interactions. He clung to the idea that he was simply being a mentor, a source of stability in Heather's chaotic life, a lifeline in the stormy sea of her personal struggles. He told himself that he was helping her, that he was doing the right thing, even as a nagging voice in the back of his mind warned him of the danger he was courting. But Heather wanted more than mentorship, more than stolen glances and whispered conversations. She craved Nathan's undivided attention, his love, his complete and unwavering devotion. She was a master manipulator, adept at exploiting Nathan's vulnerabilities, his loneliness, his desire to be needed. She knew how to play on his sympathies, how to make him feel responsible for her happiness, her well-being. She used every tool at her disposal, every ounce of her charm and cunning, to pull him closer, to bind him to her. By December, the inevitable had happened. Their relationship had crossed the line between teacher and student, between mentor and mentee, between appropriate and inappropriate. Late one evening, after a particularly tense home game, the air thick with the electricity of victory and the lingering anxiety of a close call, Nathan found himself alone in the gym with Heather. The tension that had been building between them for months, the unspoken desires, the forbidden attraction, finally erupted. In the quiet of the empty gym, under the faint hum of the overhead lights, they shared their first intimate moment, a kiss that was both desperate and exhilarating, a transgression that would forever alter the course of their lives. Nathan, overwhelmed by a complex mix of desire and guilt, knew he had made a terrible mistake, a mistake that could shatter his marriage, his career, his entire life. But the connection they shared, the intense emotional and physical chemistry, was undeniable, a powerful force that seemed to transcend logic and reason. And Heather, with her relentless pursuit and her unwavering focus, wasn't about to let him go. Their affair, born in secrecy and fueled by forbidden passion, became a carefully guarded secret, a tangled web of deceit that would soon ensnare them all. They met late at night, in the shadows, in the hidden corners of the school, their stolen moments of intimacy punctuated by the constant fear of discovery, the ever-present threat of exposure. Heather, ever mindful of her image at school, maintained the facade of the popular cheerleader, but her obsession with Nathan grew stronger with each passing day, consuming her thoughts, dictating her actions. For Nathan, the affair became a source of constant inner turmoil, a battle between his love for his wife and his undeniable attraction to Heather. He loved Hannah, he truly did, and he hated himself for betraying her trust, for jeopardizing their future. But he couldn't seem to extricate himself from Heather's grasp, trapped in the tangled web of his own making. As the winter months turned to spring, the cracks in Nathan's carefully constructed facade began to show. Heather, her obsession growing more intense with each passing day, became increasingly possessive, her once flirtatious texts now morphing into desperate demands for his attention. She would show up unannounced at the gym, her eyes burning with a mix of anger and longing, her presence a constant reminder of the forbidden relationship they shared. Nathan, caught between his love for Hannah and his growing guilt, tried to distance himself from Heather, but she was relentless, her grip tightening around him like a noose. Hannah, ever the observant and supportive wife, noticed the subtle changes in her husband. He was quieter, more withdrawn, his once easygoing demeanor replaced by a brooding silence. He threw himself into his coaching, taking on extra practices and games, an attempt to escape the turmoil that consumed him. She knew something was wrong, but he refused to confide in her. A wall of secrecy erected between them. The distance between them grew, a chasm that seemed to widen with each passing day. Heather's obsession reached a breaking point when she noticed Hannah attending more of Nathan's games. The way he smiled at his wife, the pride he showed when introducing her to his players, drove Heather into a jealous rage. She couldn't bear the thought of Nathan giving Hannah the love and attention she believed should be hers. The stage was set for a confrontation that would forever alter their lives. One fateful evening, after a particularly heated argument with Nathan, Heather made a decision that would have far-reaching consequences. She drove to Hannah's house, determined to confront her, to make her understand what she had done, to make her pay for stealing Nathan away. When she arrived, she found the house empty, Hannah having gone out for groceries. Heather, seething with rage, decided to wait. She sat in her car, her eyes fixed on the front door, her mind racing with thoughts of confrontation, of revenge. Hours later, as the sky began to darken, Hannah returned home, her arms laden with groceries. She was startled to see Heather's car parked in the driveway, a sense of unease washing over her. She approached the house cautiously, her heart pounding. As she opened the door, Heather stepped out from the shadows, her face contorted with anger and a hint of desperation. A confrontation ensued, a heated exchange of words, a battle of wills. Heather accused Hannah of ruining her life, of stealing Nathan away from her. Hannah, confused and frightened, tried to reason with her, to calm her down. But Heather was beyond reason, her obsession blinding her, her anger fueling her every action. In a moment of desperation, Heather pulled out a gun, a weapon she had stolen from her stepfather months earlier. Hannah, terrified, froze in place, her eyes wide with fear. Heather, her rage boiling over, fired, a single shot echoing through the quiet neighborhood. The bullet struck Hannah on the shoulder, just right above her heart. Hannah fell to the ground, her life counting down before her eyes as she tried to crawl to the door of the house. The sound of the gunshot shattered the silence, alerting the neighbors who had already called the police when the heated argument had originally began. When the authorities arrived, they found Heather standing over Hannah's body as she tried to let off another shot. But the firearm was old and had malfunctioned due to the cartridge getting stuck in the chamber. With guns drawn, the officers shouted for her to drop her weapon, but at this point, Heather was already beyond reasoning. Rather, she turned around, pointing the gun to the officer, eyes filled with tears and rage. In the blink of an eye, 2 shots rang out, then everywhere became silent as Heather hit the floor, right next to Hannah, still holding on to the gun as her blood pooled from underneath her body. The events of that day ripped through the quiet fabric of Brook Haven like a violent storm. The news spread quickly, carried on whispers and shocked gasps, each retelling adding another layer of disbelief. The image of the Ellis home, once a symbol of hope and new beginnings, was now stained with tragedy, the flashing lights of police cars painting a stark backdrop to the horror that had unfolded within its walls. The once idyllic neighborhood was now a crime scene, the yellow tape a grim reminder of the violence that had shattered the peace. The revelation of Nathan's affair with Heather sent shockwaves through the community. The image of the respected coach, the admired mentor, was instantly tarnished, replaced by the stark reality of his betrayal. Parents, their trust broken, withdrew their children from his team, their voices demanding his resignation. The whispers followed him like a shadow, the judgment in their eyes cutting deeper than any accusation. Though he cooperated fully with the investigation, admitting his role in the events that led to the tragedy, the public viewed him as complicit, his actions unforgivable. His reputation lay in ruins, the promising future he had envisioned, now a distant, unattainable dream. Hannah, physically recovered from her injuries, faced a different kind of devastation. The emotional scars ran deep, the betrayal a wound that refused to heal. Compounded by the knowledge of Nathan's infidelity, was a burden too heavy to bear. The future she had so carefully planned, the family she had longed for, was gone, shattered into a million pieces. The house, once filled with the promise of love and laughter, now echoed with the silence of her grief. She moved back in with her parents, seeking the comfort and support of family, the familiar surroundings, a stark contrast to the home that had become a symbol of her loss. The divorce followed swiftly, a necessary step, a final severing of the ties that bound her to Nathan. The bright light that had once shone in her eyes was dimmed, replaced by the heavy weight of grief, betrayal, and the lingering questions that haunted her waking hours. Heather's story became a cautionary tale, a tragic example of how unchecked obsession and despair can spiral into unimaginable violence. The media painted her as a troubled young woman, a victim of her circumstances, but also a perpetrator of unspeakable acts. Debates raged about mental health, accountability, and the ethics of relationships between teachers and students. For those who knew her, Heather remained a symbol of how a desperate search for love and belonging can lead down a dark and destructive path. The Ellis home stood empty for months, a silent witness to the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. The neighborhood eventually returned to its routine, the rhythm of daily life slowly reasserting itself. But the memory of that night lingered, a chilling reminder of how lives could unravel, how dreams could turn to nightmares, in the wake of love, betrayal, and obsession. The tragic events in Brook Haven left a lasting impact, a scar on the community's collective memory. It was a story of love gone wrong, a betrayal that cut deep, and the devastating consequences of unchecked obsession. A life was lost, a family was torn apart, and a quiet town was forever changed by the secrets and lies that had lurked beneath its seemingly peaceful surface. We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments section below. And if you found this story insightful, please subscribe and leave us a like. We would really appreciate that.